There are many sources of magnificent insights and sharings of great beauty, and we've stopped down on a few. I'd like us to now move forward to the person I think is the greatest poet in the history of the English language, for sure, and probably stretches across the history of humanity. One of those people who fits with Einstein and Michelangelo and Da Vinci, one of those few individuals who is, in some sense, superhuman. I want to say one more thing from a Darwinesque point of view in terms of doubt. They've discovered burial sites by a very small human creature, Homo naledi. This is a creature that had a brain about a third the size of ours, and they assumed it wasn't very bright. And now they've found a burial site in which this creature took deceased humans and honored them by placing them in a place where their bones would not be chewed by wild animals. And they also appear to have made diagrams on the walls, triangles and squares and so on, that probably had some kind of significance. Wonderful. Again, need for emendations, different elements to take into account in dealing with the magnificent Darwin. Now we move to the magnificent Shakespeare. And I thought a good way to introduce ourselves to him is with his sonnets, because they're small, 14 lines. The sonnet was started by a great Italian poet named Petrarch, a little bit younger than Dante, who declared himself to be the poet laureate. That's a good thing to do, and wrote sonnets to a young woman he loved named Laura. Wonderful sonnets in which he compared Laura to the elements of nature, obviously conveying the degree to which his mind was moved. Those sonnets were translated into English, and English poets loved them, but weren't aware that, in fact, they are a depiction of the mind of the lover as opposed to the beloved. And so they wrote these sonnets in which their eyes were as beautiful as the sun and as bright as the sun, whatever. And so their breasts were like snow, and so on and so forth. Shakespeare encountered that and thought it was ridiculous. And so he wrote a sonnet in which he discounted that approach to things without eliminating it. So you want to compare her eyes to the sun? Fine. Her eyes are nothing like the sun. And he goes through 12 lines with that kind of apparent attack on the woman he's in love with. Other women have hair like gold wires. Her hair is like iron wires, and so on. You're going to see this. And then the couplet comes, and it turns out that he loves her as much as you can love that woman you miscommunicate about. What he does is he sets up 4 lines, and then 4 lines, and then 4 lines relating to each other. I won't make a big thing of that with this poem. I think you'll be able to follow it without that. I'll have to look down to read the poem, though I know it. I don't want to get even one word wrong. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are done. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses, damask, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks, and in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. Four more. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. Couplet. And yet, by heaven, I think my love is rare as any she, belied with false compare. Whoa. Love has nothing to do with false comparisons. And in fact, we fall in love with people who have imperfections. And the imperfections become the areas that we attach our greatest affection to sometimes. Wonderful insights. Very funny poem. A big and important insight. So again, in his sonnets, he goes through sets of 4 lines. They amount to stanzas, rhyming them in a way that they call the Shakespearean rhyme. He wasn't the very first to do that, but he was the one to do it best by far. Not Petrarch's method of rhyming, and we could talk about that another day. We don't have to talk about it now. And the sets of 4 inform each other as they move towards insight, concluded with a couplet that brilliantly conveys that insight. In my mind, Shakespeare's greatest sonnet, and perhaps the greatest sonnet ever written, let's not get too carried away, is his 73rd. And it's about growing old and dying. Obviously, the sonnets are not clearly arranged in the proper order. People tend to think of them as biographical. I see no reason to do that, but I'm perfectly happy to have you do that if that makes you happy. In this set, he's in love with a young woman. She's dark-haired, and he's therefore called the dark lady very often. And he's in love with a young man. And we can talk about what that love is. Is it possible to have love without sexual interest and so on? Those are not problems we're going to deal with. In this 73rd sonnet, he talks about being old and dying, approaching death, and about the anguish that causes people who love you, in this case, the young man, and tries to reach some kind of positive function that death has in life. Well, it's not a gloriously positive one, but it's a tragically positive one. Now you may say, well, we'll die and we'll go to heaven. Well, maybe so, but we have no proof that that's true. And as a poet, rather than a religious leader, he's dealing with what is true. So in the first 4 lines, he says, I'm like late autumn approaching winter, death, everything dies. Those 4 lines are devoted to that insight. But you and I know that winter is followed by spring, and so it's an insufficient image for human death. Well, I'm dying like the day moving towards night. And that's a nice image as well, but you and I know, and he does too, that night leads to morning. So it's not a proper image of human death. And then in the third quatrain, I'm dying like embers in a fireplace, which will turn into ashes. And once they're ashes, they will not be reborn. And that, leaving out the thought of possible religious issues, is the condition we have. Does that have any positive effect? Yes, a tragic one. Here it is. Autumn. That time of year thou mayst in me behold, when yellow leaves or none or few do hang upon those boughs, which shake against the cold, bare, ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. Twilight. In me thou seest the twilight of such day as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. But we know that night does lead to morning, and therefore he leaves that one. And embers turning into ashes. In me, thou seest the glowing of such fire as on the ashes of her youth doth lie, on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. The fire was nourished by the wood, but the fire was consumed with the wood, consumed with that which it was nourished by. And now the couplet that rescues something from it. This thou perceiv'st, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. Amazing, amazing. I hope you've enjoyed that. Sometime soon, we'll go through the rhythmic elements and the rhyme elements that contribute to the meaning of the poem as well. Thank you for being with me, good friends. Bye for now.